We'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can Jessica or Alexia confirm that you can see
Yes,
the
your
screen? Yes,
screen is
okay.
full.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on a Monday morning. We really appreciate it. My name is Maritza Bandera. I am the project, let's see the screen. I am the project manager for Healing Illinois, working with the Field Foundation of Illinois to administer this project, this initiative. Joining me on this webinar today is Jessica B., Vice President of Red Resources, and Alexia Diamond, Account Executive at Red Resources. They're helping me and providing me with tech support. So if you see Healing Illinois Tech 1 and Tech 2, that is them. So we will get through this presentation. The purpose of today is really to share information about healing.
Maritza, just
Oh,
1 second. If you're
uh-huh.
advancing slides, we can't see the next
You
one.
can't see them?
The next one.
I'm advancing them on my end, sorry. So let's see, we might need to stick with this. Can you see them now that I'm
Yes,
advancing?
yes,
Yes,
yes.
okay, so we're just gonna leave it like this, not full screen mode. Thank you for letting me know. Um, So the purpose of today's session is to share information with you about Healing Illinois, answer any questions that you might have. This is our fourth or third info session. We've been having a lot of Healing Illinois activities throughout the state as well. So we've just been trying to share information. Just a reminder, we obviously welcome your questions and feedback. Please hold them to the end. This is webinar format, so you should be able to see the Q&A function, and some of the questions Alexia and Jessica will answer throughout, because there's just questions that we've been getting. There might be others that we will get to through the end, I promise. Let's see. Okay, so you should, okay. So the agenda for Healing Illinois, like I said, I'll share a little bit about the initiative. We'll cover funding priorities. I'll talk about the evaluation criteria, the eligibility, grant terms, application process, and application summary. So I'll go through some of the questions. And then, like I said, the most important part is for us to be able to answer questions that you have. A lot of the information that I will cover today is in the RFP. There might be some additional points of clarification that we'll go through. That's why info sessions are important, but there's no additional information that I'll be sharing today that can't be found on the website or that is in public information as well. So just to take a little bit step back as it relates to Healing Illinois. Healing Illinois is an initiative of the Illinois Department of Human Services. So the initiative is funded by the state. Today in 2013, the Field Foundation of Illinois is the philanthropic partner of IDHS to administer and distribute funding throughout the state. 3 years ago, it was the Chicago Community Trust. And 3 years ago was when Healing Illinois was launched as an initiative. At the time, it was launched during the pandemic. It was post George Floyd murder. And the state at the time wanted to, like many other cities throughout the state, many cities throughout the country, many states throughout the country, wanted to figure out what could they do in the moment in response to the uprisings, to the demands, to the advocacy for racial healing, racial justice work. And that's how Healing Illinois came about, like I said, about 3 years ago. Now fast forward to 2023, IDHS and the governor and the state made a commitment once again to racial equity work, racial justice work, racial healing work. And this is where we find ourselves. The goal for Healing Illinois is to build the foundation for long-term racial healing and anti-racism work in Illinois. We know that we're not going to accomplish that in a year. It's definitely not going to happen in two. But our goal is, how do we create the conditions to get us to that over time? And we know that this is continuous work that needs to happen. Some of the outcomes, the intended outcomes that we see from Healing Illinois, is to build knowledge and understanding across communities, to strengthen trust and relationship building across among residents, how do we relate? How do we connect? How do we see each other? We definitely want to expand opportunities for communities and individuals to heal. So that's where all the programmatic work comes into place as well. And then ultimately, another component is we want to increase awareness and share the stories that are focused on racial healing and equity work. As I mentioned earlier, we've been doing a lot of regional events throughout the state, and it's been inspiring, one, to hear the projects that people are proposing in their proposals, and also the stories that we're hearing of work that was done 3 years ago and that it's still happening today. And those are the stories and the work that we definitely want to amplify this year. Some of the funding priorities, there's four, and we know that some of them, to an extent, might be a little bit confusing for applicants. So I'll share a little bit some points of clarity. So the first one is what's called racial healing sustainability. This is really designed to support projects that are existing. We know that there's not a lot of funding when it comes to racial healing and racial equity work. So we want to make sure that we are funding work that's existing. So as you think about your projects, maybe you fall in that category. And in a little bit, I'll give some examples of what types of projects and activities. It's not fully comprehensive, but hopefully it'll give you a sense of like what are the types of activities that we would fund and that fall under that category. The second priority is what we call narrative change. So this is about building awareness of racial healing and justice work. Um, this goes to the story I just shared in a little bit. How do we amplify the work that's already happening? Narrative change does get to the hearts and minds, right? It shares information about healing and equity work, and again, it with the intended outcome of like how do we relate and see each other. So narrative change is designed to do just that. Like, how do we change the narrative of how we see each other, of our communities, and the work that's happening in Illinois. The third category, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's education and training. So this is really centered on advancing and enhancing knowledge and understanding of racial healing and justice work via trainings that could be focused on different topics, but at the core, it has to connect to racial healing and equity work. And then the last category, which is new this year, is what we call racial healing readiness. And this is really meant to develop the capacity and early stage ideas that may lead to new programming. So I'll give you an example. Why we thought about racial healing readiness was because we wanted to ensure that all types of organizations throughout the state saw themselves in the work. There are many organizations that know that they would like to embed a racial equity work or even racial justice work into their mission and their core programs, but they might just not know how. And in order to do that, they might need to do some pre-work before they get to the work. And some of that might look like some landscape analysis. It might look like an internal audit just to figure out, where the organization is at in order to know and determine where they could go. So that hopefully gives you a sense. So let me give a couple more examples. So for racial healing, sustainability, the projects that would fall in this category are designed to build deeper interpersonal interactions through racial healing circles, peace circles, restorative justice practices, and much more. This is really meant to expand. So this is, like I said, sustainability is meant for organizations that are already doing work in this space. So this is for expansion. This is another component that we would encourage is organizations, the creative arts. This is where they would come into play as well, including community murals, visual artistic events, exhibitions, storytelling, um, leadership development initiatives for racial healing practitioners, organizers, and leaders of color in relation to racial healing. Like I said, we know that there's a lot of organizations that have been doing this work because it's core. They've been doing racial healing work because it is central to the work that the organization does, to their mission. And we want to make sure that we are funding and providing opportunities for those organizations to enhance their work. Sometimes it's to expand. This isn't also, let me just clarify, it's not just to expand. They might just need support, right? Because now there's funding for it. And many organizations that do this type of work do it because, like I said, it's core to their mission. It's not necessarily that they have a budget line item for it, right? So a little bit about narrative change. These are workshops, as an example, some activities that would fall under that. A narrative change would be workshops to teach community members how to share their personal stories, to activate others for action, for change. We want to amplify truths of communities most impacted by systemic racism, storytelling programs to build understanding and empathy. Getting to, like I said, the hearts and minds component would fall under narrative change. Education and training, like I said, activities that are internal or external trainings. Internal meaning it's for your staff and your board, your volunteers. External meaning it's for your constituents, your key stakeholders, and they might be trainings, like I said, focused on anti-racism, racial equity, racial justice work, might fall under that category. We've received a lot of proposals that are very much in the DEI camp, so that would fall under education and training. And then the last one, like I mentioned, it's the racial healing readiness. Some additional examples might be community consultation. So as an organization, you might want to host a series of community meetings, of focus groups with your key stakeholders to ideate and get a sense of like what are some of the programs that your community might want to see, issue identification, research, feasibility study. I gave that as an example, increasing group or organizational capacity through specific skills or trainings. But like I said, the readiness component is like think of it akin to capacity building work. It's like an organization wants to embark in this journey, but like I mentioned, where are they at in that spectrum? And they need to know that in order to know where they're going to go, right? What types of programmings they should be providing, what is the internal work that needs to happen in order for them to embark on, racial equity work or racial healing work. So that is those are the priorities, and hopefully you got a sense of what some of those activities look like. And like I said, we can answer questions in a little bit if you have more specific um, uh, project examples that you would like to bring to the fold, and we could address collectively. The evaluation criteria, how are we evaluating your proposals? The first one, the main one is alignment, right? Is the project that you are proposing corresponding to the activities? Is it in alignment with the funding priorities? Organizational capacity, does the applicant have the capacity to implement the proposed project and scope? I'll give you an example what we mean by organizational capacity. If an organization submits a statewide project, or the proposal that they submit is statewide and they only have a staff of 2 and they're asking for $100,000, to us that is out of scope, and it doesn't tell us much of the capacity that the organization has when we can see that they have a staff of 2 and they're proposing statewide project and they've named no partners, right? That's what we mean about organizational capacity. We want to make sure that organizations detail and let us know um, that they can take the dollars, that they can implement the project as well. The other example that I will give on organizational capacity is when we get proposals for education and training, and the proposal states that um, the training will be facilitated by their staff, but then they negate to tell us, what um, the capacity of their staff to handle the training, meaning they don't include bios, they don't tell us what training their staff has already received in order to be able to facilitate an org-wide training on racial healing or racial equity work. So those are the things that we want to make sure, because we can only see the proposals that you all that all of you are submitting. So that would be my advice to you. And the good thing is that you're our last info session, so we've already begun to review proposals. It's like that's some of the advice and guidance that I would give you. We can only our evaluation is just based on what you present to us. So just be concise but get very specific. Now, we don't have a problem with organizations, their internal staff handling and facilitating training. We're not saying that you always have to hire a consultant, but just be share that information with us. Like I said, what training and what has your staff already received in order to um, uh, for them to be able to facilitate an org-wide training. So I'll leave that example there. And then the last one is on project scope. Are the project activities and proposed budget in alignment with the overall time frame of Healing Illinois? We'll get to this in, I don't know if it's in the next slide. No, it's not. But I'll surface it and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about it. So as it relates to project scope, we're all on a tight timeline. We know that. We are not, like I mentioned earlier, our long-term goal is to make Illinois an anti-racist state, and we know we're not going to do that by next year. We know that we're not going to accomplish that in the next couple of months. But for us, it's like, can we chart a pathway to get there? We're all in a tight timeline. We know that we would have loved to have given you a full calendar year to implement your projects, but we know that that's not the case here. Because Healing Illinois is funded by the Illinois Department of Human Services, your funds have to be expended by June 30th. That is why there's a cap for the dollars as it relates to 30,000. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but wanted to surface that now, since one of the criteria is focused on the projected activities and proposed budget. So I'll cover that in a little bit. With Healing Illinois, because it is a statewide initiative and because the Field Foundation primarily funds in Chicago and in some of the surrounding suburbs, we don't have statewide reach, but we wanted to ensure that we're being equitable and distributing the dollars throughout the state. And that's we partnered with some organizations throughout the region. The map that you see on the screen, that is how IDHS has the state split up into 5 regions. We have intermediaries in each region. Region 2, which is pretty much all of the northern part of the state, our partner is YWCA Northwestern Illinois. Region 3 is United Way of Champaign County. Region 4 is United Way of Central Illinois. And Region 5 is Southern Illinois Community Foundation. We are no longer, Field Foundation is no longer accepting applications for those regions because their application portals are open already, with the exception of United Way of Central Illinois. Their application portal opens December 6th, but they have their own deadline. So does United Way of Champaign County. So let me start at the top. Northwestern Illinois, their application is open. You can visit their website. We can put it in the chat in a little bit. Jessica or Alexia, if you can put the links, or if you can just put the link from the Healing Illinois website where it has all the information from the intermediaries, that would be great. So Region 2, their deadline is in alignment with Field. So their deadline is December 1st, and their application portal is open already. Their process is actually a little bit easier. You go to their website, download the application, you fill it out, and then you email it to an email that's already on the application by December 1st. So you don't have to create like an account in the grants management system or anything like that. You just download, fill it up, and then submit it to them via email. Region 3, United Way of Champaign County, their application is already open, and if I'm not mistaken, their deadline is December 22nd. Region 4, United Way of Central Illinois, like I mentioned, they open up their application on December 6th, and then the deadline for them is December 20th. And then lastly, Region 5, the Southern Illinois Community Foundation, who's our partner in the southernmost part of the state. Their application is open now, and then their deadline is also December 1st. Any organizations that submitted applications through our portal, many we reviewed and we have either awarded the grant or have not, but those we've already taken care of. If we received any through the weekend, what ends up happening, we just pull the application and hand it off to the intermediary. But that's just so you know, for Region 1, there's no intermediary for Region 1 because a Field Foundation is we are the subrecipient of the Healing Illinois grant. So we are making the grants for Region 1, which is all of Chicago and Cook County. And as you might know, the deadline is December 1st. There's no intermediary for Region 1. You might be asking why. There are a lot of GATA registered organizations in Chicago and in the Cook County area. One of the reasons why we get intermediaries throughout the state is because in certain parts of the state, especially as you begin to get to the central and southernmost part of the state, there are not a lot of GATA registered organizations. And that is why it was important for us to get to partner with organizations like the ones listed on the screen to ensure that organizations that are not GATA registered in those regions could still be eligible and apply for Healing Illinois dollars. And these organizations understand the context in their regions and have the breadth and network and reach that we don't in those regions. So that is why we, like I said, have intermediaries for those regions and not Region 1. Region 1 Field Foundation, we have a good understanding of the Chicago and Cook County landscape. Just eligibility. So organizations have to be 501c3 organizations in order to be eligible for Healing Illinois funding. In addition, organizations, entities that are eligible are units of local government, public school districts, organizations that are in good standing with the Secretary of the state. Organizations that are applying through it, I just alluded to that, but just to be clear, organizations applying through an intermediary, do not have to be GATA registered because the intermediaries themselves are GATA registered. For Region 1, just also to name it, because you might be curious, or there might be someone on the webinar that might be curious, could Field Foundation serve as an intermediary for an organization that is not GATA registered in Chicago or Cook County? And the answer is no. We asked, and the reason that we were told no is because Field Foundation is the grantee of Healing Illinois, and that is why we were told no. So they're in Cook County and in Chicago. There's really no way around the GATA registration component. What I would advise organizations that might be on this call that are not GATA registered, but they would like to participate in Healing Illinois, identify an organization in your network that is GATA registered. They could apply on your behalf for your grant. Think of it as them being your fiscal sponsor. So they're applying for these dollars for your organization, for your project. And then probably the follow-up question to that is, well, what about if that organization is already applying for their own project? Could they still serve as my fiscal sponsor? And the answer is yes. An organization can submit their own proposal for their organization, and they could also serve as a fiscal sponsor using their GATA registration to support another organization that is not, in order for them to apply for Healing Illinois. So just know that we are allowing for that, and we have received a lot of proposals like that. And we know that they're separate and distinct projects, so that is why we are allowing for that to happen. Grant terms, I mentioned this earlier, funds have to be expended by June 30th of 2024. There is no way around this. That is why the cap is 30,000. What we learned from 3 years ago is that organizations, believe it or not, had trouble spending down the dollars. We were stuck kind of in the same timeline. Organizations had to spend, dollars by the end of June of that year, 3 years ago. And there were just a handful of organizations that just could not spend down 40, could not spend down 50. Some had trouble spending down 20. So we did an internal analysis of what was to try and find what was the average grant that organizations received. And it was about 25, 20, 25. And then we thought, well, let's bring it up to 30, keeping in mind inflation and all of that. And this just to us felt like the sweet spot. Anything above it, personally, I just felt like I worried that organizations would be able to spend on the money. And then it just creates a burden on the applicant. And in that case, once they receive the grant, on the subrecipient, and it becomes cumbersome on our end as well to and get the dollars back. Now you might be asking, well, what happens if we don't spend the money, right? Well, what ends up happening is you would have to give the dollars back to Field Foundation, and then we would then in turn have to return the dollars to the state as well. And that is something that we really want to avoid at all cost. We would rather an organization reach out to us and say, hey, we are struggling with our project a little bit. We've had some hiccups, or some bumps in the road, and we would like to pivot to, X, Y, and Z. We could have that conversation, and we would rather organizations pivot because it happens, right? You're going into this, you're proposing a project, you're going to implement it, and you might hit some roadblocks. And we want to be able to support any pivots, but we just would prefer an organization reach out to us, in March or April, rather than reaching out to us on June 29th, asking if that you're not going to be able to spend your dollars by tomorrow, as an example. So we just rather have like an open channel of communications and just ensure that we are supporting one another in order to to ensure that you spend the dollars down. Now I'm going to move on a little bit to the application process. If you are an existing, and let me be specific, this is at this point, as of November 14th, this application process that I'm about to walk you through is just for Region 1. Okay, Region 1 is all of Chicago and Cook County. Because we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are no longer accepting application for regions 2, 3, 4, and 5. What does that mean? We being Field Foundation, if there's anyone on this call that is applying for a project in any of those regions, you have to go to the intermediary's website and follow their application process. And as I mentioned earlier, their application process is a little bit easier than ours. Field Foundation, we have a grants management system. We use Fondant. So if you're an existing grant recipient of Field Foundation, all you have to do is log into your account, into your grant portal, and you'll see the funding opportunity for Healing Illinois available. You just click on that and you should be able to see the application. If you are not an existing Field Foundation grant recipient, and you're applying for a grant for Region 1, which, like I said, is all of Chicago and Cook County, then you will just have to create an account. Their system is pretty short and straightforward, so you'll just follow the prompts on the screen. We will have an external review committee to help us review all of the Healing Illinois grant proposals. It is a combination of some Field Foundation staff, myself, and of many that are volunteers that are primarily in the philanthropic sector, many that have also have a lot of experience in the nonprofit sector as well. So just a little bit about the application. The application is not very long. How long it takes to fill out simply just depends on your project and your experience with grant writing. We do have set character limits in the application, mainly because we want applicants to be clear and succinct about what they're proposing. We basically are looking like the basic information, like what are you proposing to do? Why are you proposing it? what capacity does your organization and staff have to implement that project? And ultimately, what will be different at the end of the day because of the project that you are proposing? And that's really what we're looking for. We do ask for some basic org information like the mission, year you're founded, a EIN, primary contact, ED name, contact information, etc. Organizational diversity. We want to know the staff composition and demographics of your organization. Please note this question is not punitive. If because I've gotten a lot of questions about that. We know we need to work in diversity. Our organization is not diverse. Will this be counted against us? And the answer is no. We really want to be able to report to IDHS once we have all of the grant recipients for Healing Illinois selected. We want to be able to report to IDHS, the types of organizations, the demographic, the composition, the org diversity of the recipients. But it is not punitive. Mainly, it's an additional data point that we, Field Foundation, as the grant recipient of Healing Illinois, could share with IDHS. So on the screen, you'll see the questions: project name, project summary. Again, what are you proposing? Who are you going to engage? What funding priority will you focus on? Select the region. At this point, you should not be able to select region. You should just see region 1. Is it a collaborative project? If it's not, just put NA. If it is, then that's where you name the organizations that you are going to be collaborating with. Some organizations, even though their project is not collaborative, they'll still list out organizations that they know that they're going to partner with on this project. So it just depends on your project and what the agreement or arrangement you have with those organizations. So then, then you list out the organizations. So the collaborative project is a yes or no question. So if it's no, then I believe you just put NA. I don't think it's a yes, no, but you either put yes or you put no, or just put, not applicable. Total project, is if you're proposing the full 30, maybe your whole project is 30. In some cases, organizations have a project of their total project budget is 100,000, but they're asking for 30,000 as an example from the Healing Illinois funding pool. So that's what that means with the total project, the grant amount you're requesting, geographic area that will be served. This is, you can select, some applicants are listing out neighborhoods. If they're doing work outside of Chicago, then they may need some suburbs in some of the areas. So that's where the geographic area comes into play. Just getting a little bit more specific on that. Estimate a number of participants, like how many people do you estimate you will engage as part of the project you're proposing. Estimate a number of activities. So I've gotten a lot of questions about this one. So let's say, for example, you are proposing trainings, and you know that you're going to from now in June, you're going to facilitate five trainings. Then the number of projected activities is 5. So hopefully that is a little bit clear. Target population, I believe here we do have a list of population, so you would just check the boxes that make sense for you. And then there's the here's where we get into a little bit more about the project. It's like, tell us about your project idea. It's like the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. How do you know your organization is ready for this work and has capacity to do it? So again, we want to make sure that you are that what you are proposing is within reach, and that you have the capacity to be able to implement your project. What problem, issue, or community need are you addressing? And then describe associated short-term outcomes. If you struggle with that part, just select from the projected outcomes that we listed out. So if you recall, and I can go back to the slide later if you would like to, it's the building knowledge, building trust and relationship building. There was a narrative change one. So you could pull from those outcomes if you feel like you need additional support in that area. How will you measure impact? How are you going to track? How will you know that you were successful in the end of the day? Will you have surveys, focus groups, applications, registration? Like give us a sense of how you again track the impact, and how will you know ultimately that you were successful? Um, hopefully that's a little bit clear on that. We've gotten, before I head to key dates, we've gotten a lot of questions and we've gotten a lot of questions about um, the budget template on our website. I believe we may have updated already, but at the end, I just need to know how you're going to spend the money. So if you have your own project templates, feel free to submit that. Don't waste your time trying to figure out our template because it's just a standard template. But if you want to submit your own template, just go ahead and submit that. Like I said, I just want to know how you're going to spend the money. If you're applying for the full 30, give us a breakdown. We're going to spend, 5,000 on, I'm just making up categories. If we're going to spend 5,000 on honorariums, we're going to spend another 1,000 on food. We're going to spend 3,000 on stipends, right? Do you know what I mean? Just give us a sense of, what the programmatic costs and ultimately just how you're going to spend down, the grant amount that you are requesting. So I will just say that please don't let the template be the enemy that is holding you back. Just ignore it and submit your own template for now. Some key dates, applications will be accepted through, sorry, so we didn't update this, but like I mentioned earlier, applications will be submitted through December 1st. Oh no, this is correct, for regions 1, regions 2, and regions 3, because we have the same deadline of December 1st. Region 3, their deadline is December 22nd, and region 4 deadline is December 20th. What I will say, if there's any folks that are on this call that are from any, that are either from regions 3 or 4, or any other regions outside of region 1, the application is the same. There's no additional, there might be 1 or 2 additional questions that region 5 is asking. But it's not a gotcha question. It's really like, I think their additional question is, if we don't grant you the full 30, can you still implement your project with a reduced amount? Right? Like, that's a really great question. We might consider asking that next time if there's another round of Healing Illinois dollars. But that I believe that's the only question. Everything else, they're the same questions. Some of them might be asking for demographics, they might not, but the core questions on your project, they're the same. And like I said, region 4, their application opens on December 6th. Their application is not open yet. Region 3, their application is open already. They opened it up on the last week on the 16th. Okay, let's get to the Q&A. I'm gonna stop.
Maritza, before you get started, I just want to let you know there are a lot of questions about multi region applications, cross statewide initiatives. So I would guess probably like 10 questions about, how does that work if you're in one region but you're collaborating with a partner in another region? Where should you apply and send your application? So once you answer that, I'm going to answer all of those related questions. Thank you.
Okay, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So here's what I will say about the regions, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky because we wanted to, sorry, let me go back so you can look at the regional map. We wanted to ensure that we had equitable distribution throughout the state. So each region has their own funding allocation, which is based on population, which is based off, I believe the other filters that we use were unemployment rates, and poverty rates as well. And of course, like I mentioned, population. So as you could all guess, Region 1, which is Chicago and Cook County, just based off population, has the largest funding allocation, followed by Region 2, and then it's, distributed throughout the state. I would advise you to select your primary region, because it is hard unless you can tell, you can tell, you can share with me what that funding allocation is for the other regions. It gets a little bit tricky. And then you have to decide which region you're going to apply through. Are you applying through region 1? If you select that region 1 is your primary region, then you apply through region 1. If it's If it's another region, we are talking with the intermediary, so it's not like they're getting their money and they're just doing their own thing. So those types of projects, you just need to select, like I said, a primary region, and then I would advise you to send me a note at Heal, and it's on one of the slides, but maybe someone could put it on the chat too. It's Healing Illinois at fieldfoundation.org. I would advise you to flag those statewide projects for us. And then I think the other component that we will continue to beat this drum is that you have to spend the money by June 30th. Like I said, I know y'all are probably on this call thinking, we will spend 30. 30 is not a lot, and it's not, but you will be surprised how many organizations struggle to spend the dollars down a couple of years ago, especially when it comes to collaborative grants, or collaborative projects and initiatives, because something always goes sideways, right? One organization's ready to go, maybe the other one isn't. Things always happen. So I just want you to keep that in mind, and then be reasonable. I have received proposals that are darn near asking for half of the funding allocation for the region. I mean, that's just not feasible. Understanding that it's statewide, and we understand that, believe me, I understand that you might be submitting proposals that are statewide, they're going to reach a lot of people, but we're also not just looking for quantities. Yes, we want you to reach people, but we're also looking for substantive work that we know is going to make a difference. And sometimes some of that substantive work, as we know, is sometimes harder to measure, right? When you're trying to get to those hearts and minds, works and projects. So that would be my advice to you. It does get a little bit tricky when it's like multi-region. But like I said, my advice, if you leave this session with anything, choose a primary region. Um, if you're going to request funds from the other regions, give us a sense of how much per region, especially if you're collaborating with organizations in other regions, so that then I can have that conversation with the intermediaries and I can have that conversation collectively. But like I said, also be reasonable, because like I said, some of these regions don't, it's 5 million. It's actually 4.5. It's 4.5 that's going to get distributed throughout the state, and 4.5 is also not a lot of money for a state as big as Illinois is, and with the need that Illinois has. It is a very competitive pool. I will tell you that right now. That does not mean that I am discouraging you from applying. Please apply. But I will tell you that it is a competitive pool, and we know that we are going to get way more proposals than we will be able to fund. I specifically can say that for Region 1, and in conversations that I've had with some of the other intermediaries, we know that that's going to be the case in the other regions as well. So just keep that in mind. I'll give you an example for Region 1. I received a proposal. It's a good proposal, but they were asking for a quarter of the funding allocation for the whole region. I didn't even know where I could cut, right? So for them, it's like they're not going to get funding, or we will, they don't need to reapply. We can just open up their application again, so they just can go and edit, but they just need to prioritize. And it boils down to that. We do want to be able to fund as many organizations as possible because the need is out there. So I would also say, again, just for these statewide proposals, just be reasonable and just know that it's 4.5 million that for the whole state, and you have to spend the money down by June 30th. So when we see proposals that we know traditionally they would be 1 to 2 year proposals, and they're telling us they can implement in 6 months, we'll have a lot of questions on that. So just know that. And like I said, I'm giving you some guidance from, proposals that I've already reviewed myself, but just keep in mind that in a couple of weeks, it's not just going to be me. It's going to be it's going to be a committee that's reviewing all of the proposals. Okay. Let's see. Jessica, if you want to come off mute, I think I covered that question, but is there any other that you feel like are very consistent? Otherwise, I will begin to go through the open question tab. Is that what I should be doing?
Yeah, we've answered 24 and there are 34 open, so if we want to just kind of speed through quickly, we can.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna start at the top. So there's a question of can people on the webinar see the questions too so that I don't have to read them? Do we know?
Yes, they should be able to see the questions
Okay.
because they are commenting and upvoting them.
Okay, thank you. So let's see, I'm gonna stop with the one at the top from anonymous attendee. Mm, there's a first question about, one of my community partners is Chicago Public High School. Would we be eligible for funding, or is there a preference for working with public universities and other public agencies? No, you could work with the high school. If you're a private university, you could work with the high school. Yes, there's no preference in terms of whether you have to partner with another public university or public agency. It comes down to, is your project in alignment? So in that case, if you're a private university, you should be able to, because we don't stipulate we don't stipulate whether it has to be a public or private university. We just say university. So you should be in the clear. Okay, that I think I answered this question, but can we submit a project under more than one? Oh no, this is what specific to one. You're probably talking about, can you submit a project under more than one funding priority? If so, should we prioritize over the other? I would ask you to prioritize, unless you're proposing a project that's going to align with multiple funding priorities and stays within range. Honestly, at this juncture, that's what I would advise you to. We received a lot of proposals that align with multiple funding priorities, and the request is above 30. And like I said, I at this point would ask you to prioritize which funding priority your organization best aligns with, and stay within the requested amount. That would be my advice to you at this point. Would projects addressing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia fall under this initiative? I would say yes. We've received a couple of proposals that are addressing some of the challenges that we have seen globally that are also impacting our communities locally. So I would say yes, just tie it to those funding priorities. Are you looking to address anti-Semitism and Islamophobia from the lens of education and training? Are you hosting conversations to build understanding and trust? Are you think about how you are addressing this issue through some of the funding priorities. Hopefully that's helpful. Are consumables covered under this grant? This is a very specific question. I would say yes. You just have to give us a sense, like, are these consumables necessary in order for you to execute your project? So we're always going to come. So with IDHS in the state, the way that the lens that we look at your budgets is through the lens of the state, is like, is this reasonable and necessary? Reasonable meaning, right? Are you asking within reason? And is it necessary for you to implement your project? Is there an intermediary that we can use in Chicago area to submit your application? Hi, Leone. We don't have an intermediary for Region 1. We can talk offline. You can email me, healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org. I would ask you to partner, like I said, think about organizations in your network that are GATA registered that could serve as your fiscal sponsor. There might be some churches. I know you have existing and established relationship with churches. Churches are eligible to apply, so a church could apply on your behalf. But let's send me an email and we can talk a little bit more about it. But like I said, we don't have an intermediary in Region 1 for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. There's an overabundance of GATA registered organizations in Region 1, which basically is all of Chicago and Cook County. our organization crosses regions, Cook County plus. How do we submit? I answered that question already. Did we miss something? We have an application in progress through the main one that stated it would be open until the 1st. Is that correct? We are multi-region. Oh, sorry. Multi-region. Yeah, if you already have an application started, just go ahead and submit and we'll pull the application and just give it to the intermediary. So no worries. If it's already in the system, you don't need to reapply or anything like that. We'll just hold, once you submit on the 1st, we'll pull your application and hand it off to the intermediary. I am for Region 2 nonprofit submitting with my partner who is in Region 1. Do we submit directly to you? I read the preference not to have 2 separate applications for the same project. So for your guidance on how to go about this would be great. Submit a primary location. So I'll leave it up to you whether you want to submit via Region 1 or 2. Yeah, I would rather you not have separate applications. So just send me, yes, so choose a primary region. So whether you'll apply through Field Foundation or you'll apply through YWCA, and then send me an email. Send me a note because we'll pull your application and there might be several, it sounds like there might be several applications like this that we're just going to have conversation with the intermediaries. Because I just feel, I don't think it's fair to pull all of the funding from one region. If it's going to be a does that make sense? If it's a multi-state. So those are just kind of one-offs that I just need to have conversations with the intermediaries. So like I said, first choose who you're going to apply through and then just send me an email. Is this the only time funding will be available? What happens after the application deadline closes in December? Will the funding go away? Yeah, no, we don't know because this is because Healing Illinois is funded by the state. We don't know if there's going to be round 2 of Healing Illinois. We may not know until next year, maybe May, maybe June. I'm not sure. So as far as we know, this is it. Our hope is that there is another round and more rounds. For the same reasons I mentioned earlier, we're not going to see the impact that we want to see by doing work in a few, couple months. I know that we're running out of time, so I'm going to try and speed through these. And if you're someone that put a question on the chat, if you can stay for a couple minutes so that I can get to your question, that would be great. Otherwise, we will take these questions and we'll update the Q&A on the Healing Illinois website. So just know that you can go there too to see the updated, and or if I don't get to your question, you can always email me and I will answer. Let me make sure the emails on and I'm the one that answers the emails, so I'll make sure I get an answer to you. And I'm working this week, so just know that I'll still be responding. What would be considered indirect cost? We have the list on the website for in the Q&A on indirect costs, so I'm not going to go into that right now. Can we send a letter from the elder person or state person to support a request? That would be helpful, but we're not, it's up to you if you want to include a letter of support, but we don't require those. So it's up to you. I don't think that would, respectfully, I don't know that would have a bear on your application. We really want to make sure that your application is in alignment with the funding priorities and that you are addressing all the things that I mentioned a couple minutes ago, some of the guidance and advice I gave to all of you in relation to your application and submitting. No, there's a question about, can we do projects for ages 16 and up or just adults? No, that you can engage young people in your project as well. Children as well, just as long as it's in alignment and you're clear on how you're going to engage them, how you're going to track impact, how you were successful at the end of the day. You can, there's no age caps. When would we expect to hear about funding after applying? We're in Region 2. That is a good question. You will probably hear mid or late December. We're all kind of in the same in the same boat right now because we've received we've received a lot of applications, which is good. But it's becoming a capacity challenge right now. So just know that you'll know by the end of December, for that region in particular. Can we share what are some of the challenges that organizations find that are keeping them from expanding down? It's hard for me to say. It just depends on the organization. I'll give you an example. Some of the ones that I remember very specifically were universities. There were in Chicago, there were a couple of city colleges that had trouble spending down the money primarily because of internal processes. That was a big challenge. Some of the other ones were local units of government, staffing challenges. And some of the other ones, they just projected that the project would cost more than it did. So that was some of the other that I remember from 3 years ago. Those were some of the main ones. If Region 1 and Region 2 are applying together, do both need to be GATA registered? Just one, but just know for Region 1, all applicants have to be GATA registered. For Region 2, they do not, because you go through the intermediary. So I don't know if that helps you in one way or another. When is Region 2 deadline for application? Region 2 is December 1st. Can funds be used to pay stipends? Yes, you can use, yes, and I would encourage you to go to the website. We have a list of allowable and allowable and unallowable costs. And if I recall, stipends are allowed, but they have to be within reason. And the state mentions what they consider within reason. And it's a lot. It's a huge list. You can go through it and it'll tell you specifically what's allowed and what is not. It's a lot for me to go through right now because it is on the website. Should the budgets focus more on activities themselves or personnel running the activities? What kind of proportions are you looking for? It varies and looks different for all it looks different for all projects, so it's hard for me to say. I know that organizations can charge up to 10% of indirect costs, but that 10%, let's say you're asking for 30, that 10% has to be included in that 30. It is not 30 plus 10%. So just to be very clear on that. And in terms of, I've seen a spectrum. I've seen organizations that are charging, only like a small percentage on staffing salaries. So they might be charging, 3,000 or 4,000. And I've seen organizations that are charging the full 30. So that doesn't tell me much when an organization chooses to focus all that they're asking for 30,000 from Healing Illinois funds, and they're all just charging it to salaries. We would need a lot. We would need just explanation on that. Again, we're not saying that we won't cover salaries. We know that your staff, that you need to allocate for their timing to implement and work on their projects. We're very much aware of that. But like I said, just remember that we are looking at these proposals through the lens of the state. Is it reasonable and necessary, right? Is it necessary for your staff to get paid to run this project? Absolutely. Is it within reason? So we just ask you to keep that in mind when you're putting your budgets together. Do you prefer collaborative projects? Would projects that have collaborators have a priority in being selected in grants? Actually, no, we don't have a preference whether they're individual or collaborative projects. And a collaborative project does not have like we don't weight those at a higher rate than if it's just an individual project. So the answer is we don't have a preference. And to answer the second question, no, we don't prioritize collaborative projects. They're all, just reviewed. We have a rubric and they're all reviewed through the same lens. Okay. Are there any areas you're looking for that you're not seeing enough? We're actually, we were a little surprised that I have not, granted, we haven't looked through the second pool of applications. We've received a lot of education and training, so we're not surprised there. We haven't received a lot of racial healing readiness, not in, at least not in Region 1. That might be different for all the other regions. So we were a little bit surprised to not see a lot of proposals in that category as of yet, but But we might, we still, people still have time to submit applications. Mm. Yeah, Netsa, I hear you. I hear you, and you're preaching to the choir, at least with me. I get it. I understood. I hear you. Yes, this is Healing Illinois. Would I if I'm gonna channel IDHS, what IDHS would say is that Healing Illinois is meant for quick projects. Um, as I mentioned earlier, as someone that is stewarding the project on behalf of Field, and of course with Field Foundation, for us is like, how do we create the pathways to create the conditions for long-term work and to see that long-term viability. You're not going to see that in projects that we're asking to for 6 months, right? We know that. I know that. And we are not expecting that any of you are going to change systems in 6 months. That would just be insane. But like I said, for us is like, can we create the conditions to get to that long-term vision? And the challenge is that these are state dollars and it's all just based on what's happening in the state. And that's something that I definitely can't control. And it's still something that Field Foundation definitely cannot control either. So I hear you. I hear you and I understand. Would projects involving relational environmental justice and how it impacts health be considered an appropriate program? I would say yes. I believe that, one of the things in the RFP that we mentioned is like we want organizations to think about the intersectionality of issues facing the state, and environmental justice is definitely one of them. So I would say yes. Can fiduciary charge? Juliet, yes, they can. So keep that 10% in mind. I'm not saying that your intermediary, your fiscal sponsor would charge the full 10. So yes, they can, because we know that that they're going to spend some time applying on your behalf and working with you on it. And so yes, your fiscal sponsor slash intermediary can charge, yes. So just keep that in mind and as you put your project budget together. Are priorities equally valued or in rank order? They're equally valued. There's no one funding priority that's more valuable than the other one. Is there an expectation that applicants cover part of the project cost? No, there isn't. We know organizations that their whole project is the full, they're asking for full 30 and their whole project is 30. So no, there isn't. Is the rubric available? It should be on the website. If not, we'll make sure we add it. But basically we're reviewing against the ones that I shared earlier, but we can make it available too. I will share relevant information, but this is primarily we're evaluating organizations at these 3 main areas, what you see on the screen right now. Does your 501 have to be established for a certain time period? No, Thomas, it does not. Oh, this is a good question, Amber. No, we're not looking for that. But if you want to include them as part of your application, include it, if especially because we provided, the TA support to you and we're not looking for it, but if it makes sense for you to include it in your application, please do. Is there a specific audience that should be targeted for Healing Illinois, and what are not priority audiences? There is not. We leave that up to the organization. You understand your community and your constituencies better than I would. So I would leave that up to you. But no, there's no targeted audiences for Healing Illinois. It's open to all Illinoisans. We want all Illinoisans to see themselves in the work and to be able to participate in the activities that all of you will be providing shall you be awarded a Healing Illinois grant. If an organization would like to focus on internal staff healing projects, what category would that be? Would that be readiness? It depends. So are you thinking like you're going to do trainings? Is it racial healing circles? What are you thinking that you will do? Because the what will determine which category you would fall under. Where can I find a sample budget? We'll add one. We don't have one right now, Tyrone, but if that would be helpful for you, send me an email. Can you send me an email, please? If you send me an email to healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org, I will get something to you, I promise. But we don't have one on the website right now. And, we'll add one since you're asking for one. It might be helpful for others too. So just please send me an email, just so I can keep my thoughts straight, please. I appreciate it. Or whatever's easy, put, your email on the chat or something if you're able to. And I can email you. If we have an ongoing large project, can we get these funds for a portion of the project to be done between now and June? Yes. The answer is yes. Saba, hopefully I said your name correctly. Can we use the 30K in salary and spend our own funds and other expenses? Yeah. I'm not going to say no, but just be very explicit about that. And how are you spending your own funds on some of the other expenses? We would just want to know that. And we don't just want people, like I said, just be reasonable and just give us explanation on that. So I'm not saying no, it's a maybe. Just needs a little bit. We would need a lot more explanation because at face, if we're all we have is just looking at your project budget and just the full 30s going salaries, the reviewers might just have a lot more questions. That's all I will say. Just give us some explanation, some narrative around that. Our project consists of multiple programs that fall into multiple categories of 4 funding priorities. When we prioritize our project category, would it give us higher chances if we choose the priority that is less competitive? For example, racial healing readiness? Not necessarily. We created these funding priorities to ensure that we could reach as many organizations as possible so that as many organizations as possible could see themselves in the work. They weren't meant to, I should say, we're not surprised that we get a lot of education and training because we know there's not a lot of funding out there for that. So we're not surprised about that. And we don't mind that, right? We want to be able to provide you the funding that you need to implement the projects that you need to. So no, we are not looking, I can tell you this, we are not looking at like, we already have 80% in education and training and we have zero, which we know won't happen, but we have 0 proposals that we are supporting in readiness, as an example. We don't look at the applications through that lens. So just know that. So no. How many grants have already been approved? Not many. There's been few that have really just been solid or a straight yes because they're just strong proposals. Less than 20. There are others that were just moved to the next phase of the approval process, but not fully yes, not fully no. They're just in the next process, and we received a little bit over 60 in the last round, and then I anticipate we might receive even more by December 1st. So it just felt like it was 30, 60, so wouldn't be surprised that we receive 90 or 100 by December 1st. Can we be hyper-local targeting of certain neighborhood stakeholders acceptable? Yes, that would be acceptable. Can the project be a one-day event? Can the project be a one-day event, for example, a film series with community followed by a panel discussion of racial justice? It could be. Yeah, we're not saying all organizations have to implement multiple projects through their through the project. Just be reasonable also. Like if organizations are saying they're going to be one project and they're asking for a full 30, like versus an organization that's asking for 30 and they're going to have multiple activities. Does that make sense? So I would just anticipate that your project's probably coming in at a lower request, but that's just an assumption I'm making. So just keep that in mind. But the answer isn't no. Yes, your project can just be a one-day event. We choose a category, but we think we should have been under another category. Will you move it or does it disqualify? No, we'll move it. I've seen that happen. Organizations are choosing one funding category and then I review the proposal and I'm like, actually, this is for this, it's actually this category. So we move them ourselves. So you don't need to worry about that. Can you send me this recorded? Yes. Yes, this will be shared. We do weekly and monthly circles within different suburbs since many years. Can it be counted as healing circles? Yes, but what kind of circles are they? Because healing circles are a very specific practice. So if they are circles, like, is it circle practice or are they racial healing circles? Because like I said, I would hate for you to apply and say that these are healing circles and then they're not. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying you can't apply. Maybe you can apply for funding just for the weekly and monthly circles that you have within different suburbs. I would just hate for you to name them healing circles when they're not, because racial healing circles themselves, it's a very specific practice with a very specific skill set from facilitators and practitioners that have been doing that for many, many years. So that would be my only caution to you. I think we got through all the questions. We got through all of them. Is there anything else? When is the deadline for Region 2? Region 2 is December 1st. December 1st. So if you remember anything, let me go back to that slide. I'm sorry. Here. On the screen right now, you should see all the deadlines. So December 1st is the same deadline for Regions 1, Regions 2, and Regions 5. Regions 3 deadline, it is December 22nd, and Region 4 is the 20th. And I've talked to the intermediaries as well. They, like I said, they understand their regions better than I do. So I told them that in some cases, if they need to extend the deadline for varying reasons, because they get, they're receiving a lot of feedback from the applicants, like, hey, we need more time. This wasn't a lot of time. They can do that too. So just know that I have had that conversation with them as well. What criteria are you requiring for a racial healing circle facilitator? There isn't necessarily a criteria that we're looking for. We just know. So one of our partners for Healing Illinois is TRHT, the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation of Greater Chicago. So because of just the partnership and the work, we're just familiar with what racial healing circles are. If for example, you submit a proposal that you're going to, I'm just using this as an example, you facilitate racial healing circles for your external facilitators. I go back to the staff part, and you say that your staff is going to be the one facilitating. We would want to get a sense of like what skill set and background and training your staff have received to facilitate those circles. If it's an external facilitator, okay, maybe you will say, oh, they've been certified, or they've done, X, Y, and Z. They've been hosting racial healing circles for X amount of years. So just keep that in mind, That's the only thing I'll say. We don't have necessarily like a rubric of how we're how we're reviewing facilitators per se. Hi, Nicholas Cepeda. I might just, if you can put your email in the chat, I'll just follow up with you, because I think this is let me give this some thought so I could be helpful to you. Oh, thank you so much, Juliet. I appreciate that. If y'all are, for folks that are still on the webinar, someone of their organization is volunteering to be intermediary for Region 1. I appreciate that. Thank you. I have not heard you mention Region 7 and 8. We follow, as I mentioned, there might be different agencies in the state that divide the state up to different regions. We follow the regional map of IDHS. Tamika. So hopefully I said your name correctly. If I didn't, my apologies. So this is the state, this is how IDHS divides up the state, and we follow the same map. So there's only 5 regions. Other state departments, others might divide the state up into different regions, but in this case, we're following IDHS. So you should be able to see the map on the screen. Got it. Okay, thank you. Noted, Nicholas, thank you. When will grants be approved and paid out? That is a question I am not going to answer because I don't want this recording being held against me. So we know that organizations in our region, in Region 1, will be notified. Our goal is to notify everyone by mid-December. The challenge is that then we begin to come up against the holidays. So, but our goal is still to do that. So we're working aggressively to make sure that that happens. In terms of the paid out, I don't know yet. That information will be in the grant agreement that organizations receive. So I'm not in a position right now to tell you exactly when organizations will receive their funding. Is there a way to send support attachments? You should be able to attach, you should be able to make upload attachments through our web portal through Region 1. If you can, for whatever reason, just email it to me. Email it to Healing Illinois. Email it to Healing Illinois Field Foundation and just tell me this is an attachment for my proposal. But you should be able to upload attachments to it. But if you can't, just email it to me. Any other questions? If there aren't, I know we're at time. It's 10:20, so thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this was helpful. I hope it was informative. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate to email me at healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org. If you get your applications in by the deadlines, that we shared, you go back just so you have that because there's different regions. But thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for, for everything. And we look forward to reviewing your proposals. And yeah, anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, don't stress out about that budget template. Don't stress out about things that you're having issues with the grants management system. Just, I'm an email away. So just make sure that you could email me. At that email, I'm the one that answers. So please respond. I thought I saw a question. Maybe Jessica or Alexia, you answered if this is a reimbursable grant. It is not. So you will receive, organizations that are awarded the Healing Illinois grant will receive the money up front. This is not a reimbursable or spend down. So you'll get all of your money up front. And I believe that is the case for all of the regions as well. Some of them are doing a little bit different. They might only release half of it, but we'll get clarity with them. But at least for Region 1 and the majority of them, we've all agreed that you're going to get your funding up front.